Chapter 3. I had been assured that the old man could do nothing but hint at a wild, disjointed, and incredible legends, and I had been warned that the natives made it unsafe to be seen talking to him. Yet the thought of this aged witness to the town's decay, with memories going back to the early days of ships and factories, was a lure that no amount of reason could make me resist. Curiosity flared up beyond sense and caution, and in my youthful egotism I fancied I might be able to sift a nucleus of real history from the confused, extravagant outpouring I would probably extract with the aid of whiskey. A quart bottle of such was easily, though not cheaply, obtained in the rear of a dingy variety store just off the square in Elliot Street. Re-entering the square, I saw that the luck was with me. For shuffling out of Payne Street around the corner of the Gilman house, I glimpsed nothing less than a tall, lean, tattered form of old Zadok Allen himself. In accordance with my plan, I attracted his attention by brandishing my newly purchased bottle, and soon realized that he had begun to shuffle wistfully after me as I turned into Waite Street on my way to the most deserted region I could think of. Before I reached Main Street, I could hear a faint and wheezy, "Hey, mister!" behind me, and I presently allowed the old man to catch up and take copious pulls from the quart bottle. I began putting out feelers as we walked along to Water Street and turned southward amidst the omnipresent desolation and crazily tilted ruins, but found that the aged tongue did not loosen as quickly as I had expected. At length, I saw a grass-grown opening toward the sea between crumbling brick walls, with the weedy length of an earth and masonry wharf projecting beyond. Piles of moss-covered stones near the water promised tolerable seats, and the scene was sheltered from all the possible view by a ruined warehouse on the north. About 4 hours remained for conversation if I were to catch the 8 o'clock coach for Arkham, and I began to dole out more liquor to the ancient tippler, meanwhile eating my own frugal lunch. In my donations, I was careful not to overshoot the mark, for I did not wish Zadok's vinous garrulousness to pass into a stupor. After an hour, his furtive taciturnity showed signs of disappearing, and something or other had caused his wandering gaze to light on the low, distant line of Devil Reef, then showing plainly and almost fascinatingly above the waves. He bent toward me, took hold of my coat lapel, and hissed out some hints that could not be mistaken. "As war all begun, a curse pies of all wickedness when the deep water starts. Gate of hell, she had dropped down to a bottom, no sounding line Kintag. Old Captain A boat on it. Him that found about more than was good for him in the South Sea Islands. Never was nobody like Captain O, but old limber Satan. I can mind him a-telling about foreign parts and calling all the folks up for going to Christian mating and bearing their burdens meek and lowly. Says they'd ought to get better gods like some of the old folks in Ingies, gods as would bring them good finishing in return for their sacrifices. I don't really answer folks' prayers. Matt Elliot, his first mate, talked a lot too. And he was Asian folks doing any heathen things. Told about an island east of Otherheath, where there was a lot of stone ruins older than anybody knew anything about, kind of like them on Ponap in the Carolines, but with carvings of faces that looked like the big statues on Easter Island. There was a little volcanic island near that too. What there was other ruins with different carvings. Ruins all wore away like they'd been under the sea onked, and with pictures of monsters all over him. Well, Sir Matt, he says the natives around had all the fish they could catch, and sports and braces and omelets and herrings made out of queer kind of gold and covered with pictures or monsters just like the ones carved over the ruins on the little island. Sort of fish like frogs, or frog like fishes. I was drawn in all kinds of positions like they was human beings. Nobody could get out of them what they're got all the stuff, and all the other natives wondered how they managed to find fish in plenty, even when the very next islands had lean pickings. Matt, he got to wandering too, and so did Captain Obed. Obed, he notices besides that lots of the handsome young folks would drop about aside for good from year to year, and that they want many old folk around. Also, he thinks some of the folks looks darned queer, even for Kanakas. It took Obed to get the truth out of the heathens. I don't know how he'd done it, but he began by trading for the gold-like things they were. Asked them what they come from, and if they could get more, and finally warmed the story about the old chief, Wallachie, they called him. Nobody but Obed would ever believe the old yellow devil, but the captain could read folks like they were books. Nobody ever believes me now when I tell him. I don't suppose you will, young fella. Oh, come to look at you, you have kind of got sharp reading eyes, like Obed had. The old man's whisper grew fainter, and I found myself shuddering at the terrible and sincere portentousness of his intonation, even though I knew his tale could be nothing but drunken fantasy. What, Sir Obed? He learned that there's things on this earth as most folk never heard about, and wouldn't believe if they did hear. It seems these Kanakas were sacrificing heaps of their young men and maidens to some kind of god things that lived under the sea, and getting all kinds of favours in return. They met the things on the little island with the queer ruins, and it seems them awful pictures of rockfish monsters were supposed to be pictures of these things. Me, there was a kind of critters that's got all the mermaid stories, and such started. There are all kinds of cities on the sea bottom, and this island was heaved up from there. Seems they was some of the things alive in the stone buildings when the island come sudden to the surface. That's how the Kanakas got wind they was doing there. Made sign talk as soon as they got over being scared, and pieced up a bargain afore long. Then things, like human sacrifices, I'd had 'em ages afore, but lost track of the upper world after a time. What they done to the victims, it ain't fair me to say, and I guess Obed wouldn't none too sharp about asking, but it was all right with the heathens, 'cause they'd been having a hard time and was desperate about everything. They gave a certain number of young folks their seed twist every year, May Eve and Halloween, regular as could be. Also give 'em of the carved knickknacks they made. What the things agreed to give 'em in return was plenty of fish. They drew 'em in from all over the sea, and a few goat-like things now and then. When it come to mating with them toad-looking fishes, the Kanakas kind of balked, but finally they learned something that's put a new face on the matter. Seems that human folks has got a kind of relation to such water beasts, that everything alive come out of the water on't, and only needs a little change to go back again. Then things told the Kanakas that if they mixed bloods, they'd be children, as would look human at first, but later turned more like the things, till finally they'd take to the water and join the main lot of things down there. And this is the important part, young fella. Them as turned into fish things and went into the water wouldn't never die. And things never died, except they was killed violent. Well, so Seems by the time I would know them islanders, they was all full of fish blood from them deep water things. When they got old and began to show it, they was kept hid until they felt like taking to the water and quitting the place. Some was more attacked than others, and some never did change quite enough to take to the water, but mostly they turned out just the way them things said. Them as was born more like the things changed early, but them as was nearly human sometimes staying on the island till they was past 70, though they'd usually go down under fair trial trips afore that. Folks as had took to the water generally came back a good deal to visit, so as a man would often be a-talking to his own 5 times great-grandfather, who had left the dry land a couple of 100 years or so afore. Everybody got out with the idea of dying, except in canoe wars with the other islanders, or as sacrifices to the sea gods down below, or from snakebite or plague or sharp galloping ailments, or something afore they could take to the water, but simply looked forward to a kind of change that weren't a bit horrible after a while. They thought they'd got was well worth all they'd had to give up. I guess Obert kind of come to think the same himself when he chewed over old Wallackey's story a bit. Wallackey, though, was one of the few as hadn't got none of the fish blood, being of royal line and intermarried with royal lines on other islands. Wallackey gave him a funny kind of thingamagic made about a lead or something, that he said it would bring up the fish things from any place in the water, or they might be a nest of them. The idea was to drop it down with the right kind of prayers and such. Wallackey allowed as was the things were scattered all over the world, so as anybody that looked about find a nest and could bring him up if they was wanted. Matty didn't like this business at all and wanted Obert should keep away from the island, but the captain was sharp again and found he could get them goat-like things so cheap it would pay him to make a specialty of them. Things went on that way for years, and Obert got enough of that goat-like stuff to make him start the refinery and Waite's old run down Fulham Mill. Well, come about 38, when I was 7 years old, Obert he found the island people all wiped out between voyages. Seems the other islanders had got wind of what was going on, and took matters into their own hands. Suppose they must have, after all, them old magic signs, as the sea thing says, was the only things they was a-heard of. No telling what any of them Kanakers will chance to get a hold of when the sea bottom throws up some island with ruins old in the deluge. Pious cusses these was. They didn't leave nothing standing on either the main island or the little volcanic island, except what parts of the ruins was too big to knock down. That naturally hit Obert pretty hard, seeing as his normal trade was doing very poor. It hit the whole of Innsmouth too, because in seafaring days, what profited the master of a ship generally profited the crew proportionate. Most of the folks around the town took the hard times kind of sheep-like and resigned, but they was in bad shape because the fishing was pettering out and the mills weren't doing none too well. Then's the time, Obert he began a cursing at the folks for being dull sheep and praying to Christian heaven, and didn't help none. He told 'em he'd know the folks as prayed to gods that give something you really need, and says if a good bunch of men would stand by him, he could maybe get a hold of certain pairs as would bring plenty of fish and quite a bit of gold. Here the old man faltered, mumbled, and lapsed into a moody and apprehensive silence, glancing nervously over his shoulder and then turning back to stare fascinatedly at the distant black reef. When I spoke to him, he did not answer, so I knew I would have to let him finish the bottle. He licked its nose and slipped it into his pocket, then beginning to nod and whisper softly to himself. I bent close to catch any articulate words he might utter, and thought I saw a sardonic smile behind the stained bushy whiskers. Yes, he was really forming words, and I could grasp a fair proportion of them. poor man. Mighty honest with agent. He tried to line up the folks on his side and had long talks with the preachers. No use. They run to the congressional parson about the town, and the Methodist fella quit. Never did see resolved Babcock, the Baptist parson, Hagen, Roth, Jehovah. I was a mighty little creature. I heard and seen what I seen. Dagon, and Ashtoreth, Belial, and Beelzebub, Gobunkaf, and the idols of Canaan, and the Philistines, Babylonish abominations. Men, Dekel, Uphasen. He stopped again, and from the look in his watery blue eyes I feared he was close to a stupor after all. But when I gently shook his shoulder, he turned on me with astonishing alertness and snapped out some more obscure phrases. Don't believe me, eh? Then just tell me, young fella, why Captain Obed and 20-odd other folks used to row about a devil wreath in the dead of night and chanting things so loud you can hear them all over town when the wind was right. Tell me that, eh? And tell me why Obed was always dropping heavy things down the water, the deep water, to the other side of the reef, while the bottom shoots down like a cliff flow eking sound. Tell me what he done with that 40-shaped Lee thingamajig as well as he gave him, eh, boy? The watery blue eyes were almost savage and maniacal now, and the dirty white beard bristled electrically. Old Zadok probably saw him shrink back, for he began to cackle evilly. Again to see, eh? How about the night I took my parachute glasses up to a coupler and see the reef, a bristling thick with shades that drove off quick, showing the moon rays. I bet them folks was in a dory, but them shapes drove off the far side into the deep water and never come up. How'd you like to be a little shaver alone up in a cupola watching shapes as wasn't human shapes, eh? The old man was getting hysterical, and I began to shiver with a nameless alarm. I laid a gnarled claw on my shoulder, and it seemed to me that its shaking was not altogether that of mirth. Suppose one night you say something heavy heaved off, and Obed's dory beyond the reef, and then next day a young fellow was missing from home, eh? And anybody ever see hide or hair of Hiram Gilman again? Did they? Nick Beers, and Lily Waits, and Adoniram Sedgwick, and Henry Garrison, eh? Well, sir, that was the time Obed begun to get on his feet again. Foxy's 3 doctors are wearing goat-like things as nobody'd ever seen on before, and smoke started coming out of the refinery chimney. Other folks was prospering too. Fish began to swarm into harbour fit to kill, and heaven knows what size cargoes we began to ship out to Newburyport, Arkham, and Boston. 'Twas then Obed got the old branch railroad put through. Remember, I ain't saying Obed was set on having things just like they was on that Kanaki Isle. I don't think he ain't at first to do no mixing, nor raise no youngs to take through the water and turn into fishes with eternal life. He wanted them gold things and was willing to pay heavy. And I guess the others was satisfied for a while. Come in 46, the town done some looking and thinking for itself. Too many folks missing, too much wild preaching and mating over Sunday. Too much talk about that reef. I guess I've done a bit by telling Seligman Murray what I see from the coop below. There was a party one night as followed Obed's crowd out to the reef, and I heard shots betwixt the dairies. Next day Obed and 32 others was in jail, with everybody wondering just what was afoot and just what charge against him could be got to hold. God, if anybody looked ahead, a couple of weeks later, when nothing had been thrown into the sea for that long. Zadok was showing signs of fright and exhaustion, and I let him keep silence for a while, though glancing apprehensively at my watch. The tide had turned and was coming in now, and the thunder waves seemed to arouse him. "An awful night. Seen them. I was up in the cupola, hordes of them, swarms of them, all over the reef, and swimming up the harbour into the Mannix head. Got what happened in the streets of Innsmouth that night. The rats were outdoor, but part wouldn't open. Then he climbed out the kitchen window with his musket to find Select Man Murray and see what he could do. Mounds of the dead and the dying, shots and screams, shouting in Old Square and Town Square and New Church Green. Jail thrown open, proclamation, treason. Called it the plague, and folks came in and found half our people missing. Nobody left but them, as you'd join in with Obed and them things, or else keep quiet. Never heard of my pa no more." The old man was panting and perspiring profusely. His grip on my shoulder tightened. "Everything cleaned up in the morning, but there were traces. Nobody came to take charge and said things is going to be changed. Others worship with us at mating time, and certain houses has got to entertain guests. They wanted to mix like they'd done with the Kanakis, and he, for one, didn't feel bound to stop him. Far gone was Obed, just like a crazy man on the subject. He says they bring us fish and treasure, and should have what they hankered after. Nothing was to be different on the outside, only we was to keep shy of strangers if we knowed what was good for us. We all had to take the oath of the God, and later on those second and third oaths. And some of us took. They had help special, get special rewards, gold and such. No use bargaining, for there was millions of them down there. They'd rather not start rising and wiping out humankind. But if there was gave away and forced to, it could do a lot towards just that. Yield up enough sacrifices and savage knickknacks and heartbreak in the town when they wanted it, and they'd let well enough alone, all in the bag of the faithful order of the gone, and the children should never die, but go back to the Mother Hydra and Father the Gone, where we all come from. Onks. Yeah. Thorhufsang. Ingri. Regarnar. Thorhuria. Ugarnagelftarin. Old Zadok began to moan now, and tears were coursing down his channeled cheeks into the depths of his beard. God, what I seen, son. I was 15 years old. Man, tackle pausing. The folks I was missing and them has got themselves. Them was all things in Arkham or Ipswich and such places was all called crazy, like you're calling me right now. Oh God, I seen. They killed me long ago for what I know, and that took the first and second oaths of the God off and no bad. So I was protected, unless a jury of them proved I told things, knowing and deliberate, but I wouldn't take the third oath. I'd die rather than take that. The God off first around Civil War time, while children born since 46 began to grow up, some of them, that is. I was a third. Never did no prying after that awful night, and never seen one of them crushed in all my life. That is, never no full-blooded one. Barnabas Marsh, that runs the refinery now, is Ober's grandson by his first wife. Son of once for us, his oldest son, but his one was one of them, as was never seen outdoors. Right now, Barnabas is about changed. Can't shut his eye no more. And he's all out, all shape. They say he still wears clothes,
Didn't take to the water soon.
The sound of the incoming tide was now very insistent, and little by little it seems to change the old man's mood, from maudlin tearfulness to watchful fear. He would pause now and then to renew those nervous glances over his shoulder or out toward the reef, and despite the wild absurdity of his tale, I could not help beginning to share his vague apprehensiveness. Zadok now grew shriller and seemed to be trying to whip up his courage with louder speech.
Hey, why don't you say something? How'd you like to be living in a town like this with everyone rotting and dying and boarded up monsters crawling and bleeding and barking and hopping round black cellars and attics everywhere you turn? Hey? Well, sir, let me tell you that ain't the worst.
Zadok was really screaming now, and the mad frenzy of his voice disturbed me more than I care to own.
Curse ye! Don't set that staring at me with them eyes. I told Herbert Mars is in hell, and he's got to stay there. In hell, I says, can't get me. I ain't done nothing, not told nobody nothing. Are you, young fella? Well, even if I hadn't told nobody nothing yet, I'm going now. You just sit still and listen to me. This is what I ain't never told nobody. I says I didn't get to do no prying after that night, but I found things about just the same. You want to know what the real horror is, eh? Well, it's this. It ain't what them fish devils has done, but what they are going to do. They're bringing things up out of what they come from into the town. Been doing it for years and slackening up lately. Them houses north of the river betwixt Water and Main Street is full of them. Them devils and what they bring and what they get ready. And when they get ready, they hear tell of a Shoggoth. Hey, do you hear me? I tell you I know what them things be. I seen them one night and...
The hideous suddenness and inhuman frightfulness of the old man's shriek almost made me faint. His eyes looking past toward me, the malodorous sea, were positively starting from his head, while his face was a mask of fear worthy of Greek tragedy. His bony claw dug monstrously into my shoulder, and he made no motion as to turn my head to look at whatever he had glimpsed. There was nothing I could see, only the incoming tide, with perhaps one set of ripples more local than the long-flung line of breakers. But now Zadok was shaking me, and I turned back towards the melting of that fear-frozen face into chaos of twitching eyelids and mumbling gums. Presently his voice came back, albeit a trembling whisper.
Get out of here. Get out of here, they shade-ups. Get out for your life. Don't wait for nothing, they know now. Run for it, quick. Out of this town.
Another heavy wave dashed against the loosening masonry of the bygone wharf, and changed the mad ancient's whisper to another inhuman and blood-curdling scream. Before I could recover my scattered wits, he had relaxed his clutch on my shoulder and dashed wildly inland towards the street, reeling northward around the ruined warehouse wall. I glanced back at the sea, but there was nothing there, and when I reached Water Street and looked along toward the north, there was no remaining trace of Zadok Allen.